What's up, guys, and welcome to another Chatterday here on Spill the Tea with B&T. I'm your host, Tori.
And I am your host, Brooke. And today we will be getting into a little bit of a heavier hitting topic. Our last couple Chatterdays have been more lighthearted, but we did want to kind of talk about this. Like Tori and I said in our very first episode, that if we just do this podcast and we don't talk about things that are important to us or things that we know other people are experiencing, there's no point in doing this podcast at all. So today we will be talking about mental health.
And yeah, like Brooke said, we want to talk about things that are important to us. Like, we have funny stories, but obviously there's a lot more to it than just all the funny things, and we want to be as real with you guys as possible.
I obviously have had my own mental struggles. If you guys know me personally, I've struggled with mental health from the age of 13 onwards.
And I actually have a lot of mental health issues of my own. So I suffer from anxiety, depression, and ADHD, and that's just all that they've been diagnosed me with so far. You know, we don't know what the years can bring. Maybe a little couple more surprises, you know, throw in a couple more meds in there. I also have anemia.
My list of mental health illness is too extensively long to get in, but pretty much severe anxiety, bipolar depression disorder, and ADHD as well. And pretty much I have, I guess the way to describe, like, I've been diagnosed with a form of multiple personality disorder, but it's not where I think I have, like, multiple. It's not like the movie Split where I, talk about, like, oh, I have Patricia and Susie and whatever. My form is pretty much I will never feel accomplished with no matter what I do. I could run a marathon. I could get a job paying 6 figures a year, and pretty much I will never feel accomplished, or I will never feel like I've done enough in my lifetime.
And, since we both suffer with so many disorders, maybe that's why Brooke and I love each other so much, because we're both so imperfect, and I think that's okay. And we want to talk about it because, there is still a stigma with mental health, and I think we're getting better about it, but also, like, in the ways we're getting better with some things, we're getting worse about some things. And I have some pet peeves that some people don't care, but it does bother me, like when people say, oh, I have anxiety because they get nervous before a test. Or, oh, I'm so depressed because their favorite show ended. Or, you know what I mean? It's things that they're using disorders to describe things. And it's one thing to say, like, yeah, I'm sad, I'm upset, whatever, I'm anxious. But it's another to say, oh, I have anxiety because sometimes you get butterflies on roller coasters. Like, I just think it diminishes the value and how severe, not the value, but it diminishes how severe a disorder can be and how debilitating it can be. Like, I remember in high school, I used to get panic attacks so bad that I would have to go in the bathroom and call my mom because I was, like, gonna pass out. Like, I remember one time I was walking in the hallway and I got so sick and dizzy that I, like, blacked out, and I stumbled in the bathroom, passed out on the bathroom floor, and had to call my mom to have her talk me through it. And, like, looking at wedding venues with Zach, I literally passed out on this guy's lawn because just the anxiety. And I remember getting my freaking braces fitted. I was at the orthodontist office getting the x-rays done to take pictures of my teeth. Guess who passes out? This bitch. And I think, like, it's one thing, and I feel like it depends how you use it, but I don't like people lessening the severity and, like, how hard it is to live with something by saying, just throwing it around. I feel like it does make it more normal, but not in the way that it needs to be.
Yeah, I know that my anxiety, like, I have super bad social anxiety, and if you know me, you're like, whatever, like, no, you're so sweet, you talk to everyone, but, like, whenever I have to go to the store, like, I have, like, a full-blown panic attack. Like, I get this weird thing where I'm like, oh my god, are people looking at what's in my grocery cart? Are they judging me for what's in my grocery cart? Going to the doctors is horrible. Job interviews, horrible, because the second you leave, you're like, okay, so I'm a piece of shit, and they're never gonna fucking hire me, and they hate me, and this, and that. It's so hard to, I mean, like Tori said, it literally can be a debilitating, like, disorder. I mean, there are times where I've been so depressed that I can't even get out of bed, let alone clean my house, let alone cook a dinner for me and my fiance, do certain things. And it's so hard because it not only takes a toll on you, but, I mean, there's been many relationships that it's taken a toll on for me, friendships, etc. I mean, there's so many different forms of mental illnesses themselves. And, we're going to kind of touch on some statistics and different topics, but unfortunately we can't get into everything. Not only that, we are not a psychiatrist or anything like that. We are not in any medical field. I don't want to be like, oh, if this is how you're feeling, you have this. Like, I'm not going to diagnose anyone, but we do want to bring, some awareness, because I know how alone it can make you feel and how, isolating it can be to feel like you're the only person struggling with this.
And we have a lot of our own personal stories that we want to share with you guys. Like we said, we're just sharing our own experiences and things that we've found researching this stuff. And we just want to kind of let everybody know, like, you're not alone. Like, we experience this too. And there are a lot of other people who experience this too. And we both have like really, really deep stories. And with that, so we do want to get into this saying that there is going to be a trigger warning right now to say this does include talking about suicide, self-harm, sexual abuse, eating disorders. We just want anybody that's sensitive to any of these topics to please just click off. We care about your mental health, and this may not be the best episode for you. If you're suffering right now, this may be a great episode for you to listen to. This may not be, but if you don't think you can handle it, we definitely advise for you to click off.
So with that, we're going to start into some of the statistics, and each statistic will kind of sidebar, make our own comments, and then talk about our own experiences. But 1 in 5 adults will be diagnosed with a mental health condition in any given year. And that's just the diagnosis. That's the people that, get diagnosed. There are many people that are struggling with mental health and they don't, have the insurance to get the help they need, or they, it's something that it takes a lot of courage to kind of go in and say, like, hey, I'm struggling mentally, I need help, and to get on certain forms of medications. I remember in high school crying to my mom because I was like, I don't want to have to take a pill to be happy. I just want to be like everyone else and be able to be happy normally. And so, these are just the people that have been diagnosed with a disorder or a mental health condition.
So 50% of mental health issues are established by age 14 and 75 by age 24. And I'm 23, and so is Brooke right now. And I think we've both gotten a lot of diagnosis. So,
like I said, I have struggled with mental health from the age of 14. I was officially diagnosed at the age of 16. And I was also institutionalized by the age of 17 for different suicide attempts and just my struggles with mental health.
So anxiety is the most commonly diagnosed mental illness in America.
Which, if you think about it, like Tori said, a lot of people will just be like, I have anxiety about this. But these are people that went and sat down with a doctor or a psychiatrist or whatever, and they were diagnosed with this condition. And half of these people will develop these conditions by the age of 14, like I said, which being a teenager is hard enough, let alone to have such a heavy diagnosis at the age of 14. Like, that's so heavy to get.
And when I get a little bit more into my story, I will tell you kind of some different diagnoses I got from being a teenage girl. And like, it's hard to separate what of that is really being a teenage girl and what of that is actual like mental health problems. And so, we're both going to share our stories, and mine does include a lot of talk about that.
40% of people will meet criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition sometime in their life, and half of those people will develop those conditions by the age of 14, like I said earlier.
So about 17.3 million U.S. adults have major depression. About 3.1 million youth, so the ages 12 to 17, have major depression. Major depression is also one of the most commonly diagnosed mental illnesses.
And like I said earlier, people sometimes just like, you'll say like, oh, I've been diagnosed with depression, and they just think it's like, oh, you're sad. No, it's like, I can't get out of bed. I can't spend time with my family. I can't spend time with my friends. I can't reach out for help. Depression is such a heavy diagnosis to live with, and it is something, even though it says like 17.3 million U.S. adults are diagnosed with it and 3.3 million adolescents, it's still something 3.1 million youth are diagnosed with major depression. It's still something that just makes you feel so alone and so isolated. Over 12 million U.S. adults have been diagnosed with PTSD. 3.7% of youth are diagnosed within any given year, and 5.7 adults are diagnosed in any given year. I do live with PTSD from some pretty traumatic childhood situations I went through. And, even though I'm 23, I still struggle with things that I went through as a child that it was so out of my control that I have compulsion problems because of it, because it's just something that, because of my childhood feeling so out of control in certain parts of my life, that I am kind of struggling to maintain, or I don't want to feel like I'm losing any control in my adult life.
So on average, 1.5 million US adults live with schizophrenia.
And schizophrenia is, for those of you that don't know, it's pretty much just kind of seeing things, hearing things, so much more that goes into it, but I've luckily never really encountered anything like that. But if you do, my heart goes out to you. That, that's something, unfortunately, I cannot sympathize with, but just know that, you're not crazy. Because I feel like the second you're, diagnosed with a disorder like that, people are like, oh, so you're crazy. And it's no, not at all.
Well, and the sad thing, too, is there's a lot of people who are homeless that, can't afford the necessary medical treatment, and they can't get jobs because their schizophrenia prevents them from being able to live a normal life. And so they end up homeless. And that's so sad and so heartbreaking. And I was watching a video of someone who has schizophrenia, and it's so crazy to see how many times he stopped just in a 10-minute long video by hearing voices or seeing things, and it really interrupts your life so much, and it's so heartbreaking to see, and it really does lead to a lot of people being homeless, because if you look at it, most people who are homeless do have, mental disorders, and that's something really heavy to think about. Some people have a certain view on that, if you're homeless, it's your choice, but I mean, if you got to think about the people who really can't afford to get the help that they need and deserve, and I think, mental health is so important, and it should be something that should be taken care of, and I think that's a right, is you should be able to have your mental health taken care of.
9.8 million adults have reported suicidal thoughts or tendencies in the last year. Like I said, I was hospitalized at the age of 17 for suicidal tendencies, and that was something that did not just end after my hospitalization. That is something that I have struggled with, for a very, very long time, and it's so hard because people kind of just diminish that. And how many times do you hear people be like, I'm just going to kill myself? And sometimes you say it in a jokingly manner, but there are people that are literally struggling just to continue to live their lives and are fighting a battle that, unfortunately not everyone is going to make that battle or win that battle.
So 3.9 million who identify as LGBTQ have experienced mental health struggles, and we did touch on this in our LGBTQ episode. That's actually our very first episode. If you do want to hear more about it, you can listen to that. We talk about how people who are LGBTQ, they have a lot more of a risk for being suicidal or suicidal thoughts, self-harm, things like that, because of the horrible struggles that they face from people being cruel.
Less than 50% of returning veterans in need will receive any mental health treatment. And that is something that, everyone you see it on social media, the 22 push-ups a day trend, things like that, to bring bring awareness to mental health for veterans or anyone serving. And unfortunately, it's something that, I do have friends who are in the military, and they say that they can't talk openly about it because the military you report certain things, the military can kick you out, they can, all these things, and you're also viewed as weak because, if you ask for help. And that's just so hard because these are people that are literally putting their lives on the line for us, and, 50% of those people will never receive any form of help, and that is, just heartbreaking.
So 22 veterans die by suicide every year, majorly linked with PTSD that goes untreated. I actually watched a TikTok video of someone who is in the military, and he said that, he called to say, hey, I need some mental health, help, and he called them and they said, yeah, it'll be October. And that was in July. And then he said, okay, well, I'm going to kill myself. And they were like, all right, we'll see what we can do. Could you imagine how many people live with PTSD in the military and this guy had to wait until October? Who says by October he'll still be alive? And that's such a depressing thought to think about, but it's a very real thought. And that's something that really needs to be thought about and addressed. And it's really sad to see people go through something like that and not have access to the help that they need.
And we have talked about our friend Garrett before. He is in the Marines, and last time he was home, him and I were kind of having a heart-to-heart because he's one of those people that I reach out to when I am struggling mentally, and he is one of the people that I know I can always count on to talk to without judgment, without, hearing anything about, like, okay, you're just being dramatic or whatever. He is one of those people that he will listen and he will talk. And he said how hard it is to receive any mental health in, the Marines because, like I said, like the military can kick you out because you're diagnosed with a mental illness, different things like that. And he actually knew a couple people who had unfortunately committed suicide because of undiagnosed mental health. And that's just heartbreaking because, like I said, these are people who are risking their lives every day for us, who are busting their ass. And it is so sad to think that, like, they're not getting any help. And that's just, I always am like, Garrett, if you are ever struggling, like, call me, text me.
So with that being said, Brooke and I do want to talk about our stories a little bit.
Like I said, I was diagnosed with my first mental health disorder at the age of 16. And that was something really hard for me to reach out and ask my family for help. I had struggled for a long time before that, but at 16 is kind of when I just hit my breaking point. Being a teenager is hard. Being a girl with hormones is hard. We reached out. We got me an appointment with my family practitioner where I was diagnosed some antidepressants. By the age of 17, I had been hospitalized for a suicidal attempt, and that was super, super hard to go through because not only do you feel so alone because you're obviously institutionalized, you don't have really any contact with your friends. Your family can come on a visiting basis, only X amount of people at a time. My mom and my dad were, the people who came and visited. And it was something that was super, super hard. When I had gotten out of the hospital, I remember my brother had a green Montero, and I remember sitting in the driveway of my parents' house and just sobbing to him and him crying. And it was so hard because it's the first time I had ever, like, really told him, like, I did not want to be alive. Like, I did not know if I was going to make it through. I did not know, at that point when you kind of make a attempt like that, you're just done. And that was a big thing for me. That was so, so hard. And it's something that I continue to struggle with. Like I said, I have a lot of underlying childhood trauma that played a big role into it. At the age of 17, I had pulled some public records on some things that I had gone through as a child, and it kind of it threw my whole world into a whirlwind. And it was something that, it literally flipped my entire world upside down. And even moving forward, like I said, I am 23 today. I still struggle with these things. There are still things that literally give me, like, post-traumatic stress flashbacks. Like, there's just Arby's. I won't go into it. Cannot eat Arby's to this day. The little praying hand statues, that's a big trigger for me. That's a whole nother story. Just certain things. And I am obviously very grateful that I have the support system that I do. I have my friends. I have my family that I know I can reach out to. But there are a lot of people that don't have that support system. I struggled with self-harm. I struggled with an eating disorder. And it's a lot not only as a person, but as a teenager who's trying to figure their shit out and you feel like you can't. And like I said, there was a point where I remember sitting in my mom's room and just crying to her because I was like, why? Like, why can't I just be happy? And if you think about all the things that play into it, it's not just happiness. Like, why can't I live a normal life? Why can't I go to school without feeling like everyone's against me? Why can't I, go to my friend's house without having a panic attack on the way there? It's so exhausting, and there's just so much that plays into it.
So my story is actually pretty similar to Brooke's in quite a few ways, but anxiety runs on both sides of my family, and then my mom, thank you, Cheryl, for giving me ADHD, and then same thing, depression runs on both sides of my family. So I was pretty much fucked from the start. They just said mix up all the mental illnesses and throw it into this girl. So I remember my parents knew that I had anxiety. At first, when I was little, I wouldn't go swing on swing sets if other kids were out there because I had such bad social anxiety. Like, I loved to swing. Like, my whole life, I've loved to swing. And if I went to the park and there was kids, I wouldn't go. I'd make my parents take me home, and they used to get so pissed because they would take me all this way, and then I'd be like, sorry, I can't. And finally, like, I think I was about maybe 13. We were at my aunt's house. She just moved, and we hadn't seen her for a couple months. And I told my mom, I said, can you ask her where her bathroom is? And my mom was like, that's so weird for you to not be able to ask your own aunt where her bathroom is. And it is weird, it's like different. And I wouldn't even say it's weird. It's just it's not very normal behavior. So, and I mean, that's when my parents kind of figured, something might be wrong. And I did go to a doctor and they diagnosed me with anxiety and depression. So I was in about junior high when I was diagnosed with both of those. And my battle with anxiety and depression kind of was up and down my whole life, to be honest. And finally, I was about 19. It was actually March 20th of 2017. I remember the March 20th, like, so specifically, but sometimes I mix up the years, but I want to say it was March 20th, 2017. I had just had enough. I had been depressed, and I was thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And then one day I woke up and I was like, okay, today's the day. And I wrote my note and I said, all right. And I gave my parents, my passcode and my note. And it was really hard because I remember, like, thinking in my head, I was like, everybody says suicide is selfish. But to me in that moment, I was like, it's selfish to make me live this life that I don't want to live. That was my thought at the time, which is not true. So I remember I wrote my note and I left it and I came home on my lunch and I did it. And I remember my mom was on jury duty, so she wasn't supposed to be home. It was like supposed to work out perfectly. Well, I had texted her and I was like, don't come home, like, call the cops because I don't want you to see me. And she came home right away. My so-called friend Savannah came, and I went to the hospital, and it was kind of a big blur. But I remember when I woke up, I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so thankful. I was pissed at first. I was like, I'm so fucking mad this didn't work. Like, how come this didn't work? And I felt like even more of a failure because I'm like, I failed. I couldn't even kill myself. That's how bad I sucked. And that's not true, and like, it took me a few days. So I was in the hospital for 5 days. It took me probably 4 of them before, in the beginning, it was just like, I want to get out of here. I can't believe that this didn't work. I want to do it again. And then it turned into, I just want to go home. I'll say whatever I need to say to go home. And then finally it was like realizing that, I really had a problem and I was lucky to be alive. And honestly, to this day, I really think that I'm lucky to be alive. And it still is like an ongoing battle. Like Brooke said, like, I have never beat my depression. I've never beat my anxiety. I've seen multiple therapists. I've been on 10 different medications. I'm currently on about 4 different medications. And, it's something that is an everyday struggle, and I will be okay. Or at least I think I'm okay. And then one day it will just be so bad. And I remember, like, how I know if I'm doing really bad is I'll just start crying in the shower. Like, I will cry in the shower until I can't cry anymore. And it's so heartbreaking to think about now. Like, I started journaling when I was in the hospital, and that was like a really good outlet for me because I was like, this is a way for me to tell everybody what's going on inside my head without having to actually tell people what's going on inside my head. And to just get it out, like, get it out of my head and put it somewhere else. And that's like a big thing that helped me with not only my depression, but my anxiety. It's because I will think and think and think and think and think and think and think until I drive myself literally fucking nuts. And so that's something that I had to start doing. And it's really hard, honestly, like, to try to cope and to find coping mechanisms, because depression really, it's like a tornado, it sucks you in deeper and deeper. And eventually, you get past the point of wanting help. And I think it's so important to make sure that you do look into resources once you start feeling that, because there is that tipping point between, I'm depressed and I want help, and now I'm depressed and I don't care. I don't care anymore. I don't want help. I don't care. I just want to be done. And you need to make sure that you get the help before you get to that point. And that's something that I didn't do, but now I do. So they actually diagnosed me. Like I said, I was 19 at the time, when I had my suicide attempt, they said I had borderline personality disorder. And if you look that up, that's like what serial killers have. Like, it's not a bad thing because, you know, you can't help what mental illness you have. So you can't say, like, oh, wow, you got the worst one. Like, they diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. And I remember reading up on it. And it's similar to what I think I have. But it actually took until this year, back in like March, I went and saw a psychiatrist, which if you're struggling with mental health, I recommend seeing a psychiatrist. I think family doctors, you may have a great family doctor, but you need someone who specializes in this and aren't just going to give you the most prescribed medication, like the most popular medication. You need someone that's going to listen to you because of this. So I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So for 4 years, I'm thinking, you know, I've got this disorder. And I went and saw a psychiatrist and she said, no, you don't have that. That's commonly misdiagnosed in teenage girls because it has a lot of behavior teenage girls have. She's like, I think that you have ADHD. And she said that can cause a lot of your anxiety and depression. And it's true. As soon as I got on my ADHD meds, I felt not only was I more managed, but I was less anxious because I was not forgetting all the details. I wasn't so scatterbrained. I wasn't so all over the place. And I think that honestly, my suicide attempt was the best and worst thing that happened to me because when I was in the hospital, they had actual like classes that you had to do. They weren't required, but you attended these classes and they taught you like coping skills. They taught you so many things. And I talked to other people who, you know, had similar experiences to me. And it was just so eye-opening to be able to see I'm not the only one dealing with this. And okay, this is how this person deals with this. I never even thought about that. And I think in a lot of ways, I learned a lot of things from being there, even though it was the lowest of lows. It really took me hitting the lowest low to be able to get back up and say, okay, I can do this. And it really is like, and I remember people telling me all the time, it's going to get better. It'll get better. It'll get better. And I remember saying to myself so many times, I'm like, people say it's getting better, but it's not getting better. They say it's going to get better, but it's not better. How long until it's better? And I honestly feel like sometimes you do have to hit your lowest low to get to where you need to be.
Yeah, like Tori had said, in the hospital, I know Tori said, like, she was super angry. You know, she didn't want to talk to her parents. She didn't want to talk to her family. I remember being in the hospital and not talking to my parents for the first 4 days. I mean, they drove an hour to come and visit on their, you know, scheduled visitations. And I just didn't want to talk to them because I was so upset that the things, you know, I had tried didn't work out. And the, you know, like I was like, you guys don't even understand. Like you can say you understand and you don't. And keep in mind, when I went to the hospital, my parents literally took me out kicking and screaming. My dad literally picked me up, fireman carried me over his shoulders out the door. And I had kind of like hit a fit of rage because I was just so angry at the world that, I mean, I literally like have kind of blocked it out that I don't remember anything I had said. But, you know, my mom was like, you were saying things to your dad that like I can't even repeat because they were that hurtful, and saying things to me. And, you know, like it wasn't who I was. I was just in such a, you know, a frenzy because I was like, no, like this wasn't supposed to work out like this. Like I had it all planned and it's not working out like this. Like I can't. And I think, like, one of my biggest regrets was my little sister and my little brother were in the house at the time, and they had seen all of this go down. Like, they had seen me screaming, like, my dad carrying me. And I remember getting home, and it was almost like being in a different house because, like, everyone was kind of walking on eggshells. Like, they didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do because in that instance of, like, going through something like that, a lot of the times people don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. And, like, I remember the one thing I wanted most is, like, I just wanted everyone to pretend it never happened, which obviously isn't the best way to handle it, but I was just so upset. I was embarrassed. I was, you know, all of the above. And I remember going into my sister's room one night and just laying, and my sister is 5 years younger than me. Like, I'm the big sister. And I remember going and laying in her bed and her, like, spooning me. And I remember crying. I was like, this isn't how it's supposed to work. Like, I'm supposed to be your big sister. Like, I'm supposed to help you. Like, not the other way around. And just sobbing. Like, literally crying into my little sister's arms. And, you know, like, it's just one of those, like, moments where, like, you are so vulnerable. And, you know, same thing. Like, I remember talking to my brother in the driveway and just crying. And it's one of those things where you're so vulnerable. And I think that's, like, the hardest part is, like I said, I have some control issues. And being in a hospital where someone, I was scheduled my group therapy, I was scheduled my one-on-one therapy, my family therapy, the whole 9 yards. Although it did help me, at the time I felt so out of control because I was like, I don't want to do this right now. Like, this isn't on my time. I want to control it. I want to say when I'm going to talk. I want to, do what I want to do when I want to do. And I remember sitting down with one of my therapists after my parents had left because we tried to have a family meeting, and I literally just didn't talk the whole time. I literally just sat there and I was like, I have nothing to say to them. And I remember they left and she came into my room and we just had this heart to heart about like, you're here because your parents love you. There are a lot of kids who their parents would just dismiss it and leave it as is. And she's like, your parents want to get you help. And it was one of those things, like, it sometimes, like Tori said, it takes your lowest, it takes you to get to your lowest low before you can open your eyes and realize, like, okay, although this isn't where I want to be, this is where I need to be. And, after that, my mental health didn't just get better. I didn't have fucking fairy dust coming out my ass and I wasn't dancing down the street. Like, it's been a long road, and there are still times where I will just lay in bed and cry, and Joe's like, why are you crying? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just feel like everything's out of control. I feel like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing with my life. I'm 23. I should have shit figured out. I should be here in my life, and I'm not. And it's okay. Like, you can have dreams and aspirations. You can have a goal timeline. That's great. But just because you don't hit those goals or you're not where you thought you'd be, that doesn't make you a failure. That doesn't make you a bad person. Like, I remember in the hospital, I was like, my sister is this successful, like, she's a beautiful dancer. She's, a beautiful this, or that, or whatever. And I was like, I have nothing. Like, I literally have nothing to show for being who I am. Like, I'm just a person. And my therapist was like, you have this trait and you have that trait in talking, but it kind of takes someone else opening your eyes and, like, telling you, like, okay, you're not worthless, because at the time, that's literally all you feel. Like, I remember just feeling horrible, and I had actually gotten out of the hospital a couple days before Thanksgiving, and I remember, like, going to Thanksgiving dinner and just having a panic attack because, like, I didn't know what to do. I felt so, like, I had been in a hospital for the last 2 weeks, and I just felt like, okay, now this isn't my normal. Like, you guys ripped me from one normal and then put me in a new normal, and now want me to go back to my old normal. And I remember, like, telling my mom, like, that's not fair. Like, you can't ask that of me. And, my parents weren't asking that of me, but at the time, I was just so frazzled. And it's something that I've definitely had to work on. I've recently been my most recent diagnosis is obsession compulsive disorder. And when you hear that, like, when I hear OCD, I think, okay, she is really tidy, she cleans. You will come in my house and be like, this bitch lives in a frat house. There are beer bottles all over, puff bars all over. Obsession compulsive disorder is not cleaning. I mean, there's forms of it that could be like rituals or cleaning. I will have literal panic attacks that I feel like because I didn't follow my day to a certain routine, something bad is going to happen to me or happen to a family member or someone I care about. I've literally woken up at 2 a.m. to text, my sister and be like, hey, are you home? Are you safe? Like, are you okay? Different things. Just, it's such a shitty thing to live with. And if anyone else is living with any mental illness, I empathize with you. I feel for you. Just know, there is no timeline for it to get better. It may be a progression. One day you may be feeling better and the next day you're not, and that's okay. You don't have to be, even if you are receiving treatment and you feel like I should be better, there is no timeline for healing. There is no, okay, you've got to be good to go by May of 2020 or 2021. Like, there's no timeline. It's okay to do things on your own time and to feel like you're following your route of healing.
And like I said, being in the hospital helped me so much. And there was actually a girl that I met there who checked herself in because she had a stillborn. And I think that, honestly, that's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think there's so many valuable things that I learned that now I know if I really think that, I'm going to have another suicide attempt, that I know I'm just going to check myself in. Because it's honestly, at the time when I got checked in, I was like, I'm so embarrassed. And I'm so glad that I did it. I really didn't have a choice, but I'm so glad that it happened. But honestly, what I have to say, like Brooke said it, getting out of the hospital, it was so uncomfortable because I didn't want to talk about it and I didn't want to tell people about it. And I was so embarrassed, because people were just like, and I don't think anybody else knew how to approach it. And that was the hardest part for me, is like the transition between like, yeah, this happened, so now what? And honestly, like, even to this day, I think I am almost too open with some people. Like, people in my life are still really affected by it, and it's still really like a sensitive topic to everybody. And I've kind of like healed in my own ways. And I know talking to other people about it, it's almost as they're like, how are you just gonna like throw this around and, just bring this up out of nowhere? But I think the most important thing is, if people do that, don't shut them down. Like, encourage them to keep talking, because I think that talking with people is, that's why people see therapists, is to heal. So don't shut them down, because then they're going to be even more embarrassed, because that's something as a suicide attempt survivor I can say is like, the embarrassment I felt for like a long time is heavy. So make sure you don't shut people down. Make sure you let them open up. And honestly, like, it's really crazy, because whoever's listening to this, like, I want you to know, like, you're not alone. And it's actually kind of crazy because a friend of mine had actually committed and succeeded in committing suicide on the same day that I attempted my suicide. And like, to this day, I'll still like DM him on Twitter and be like, miss you. And it's so weird, the things that happen when you lose someone that you love due to suicide. And I think that that's something that, like, when you're going through it, you're like, yeah, I know they'll be sad, but they'll be better off. And I promise you, they won't be better off.
I remember one thing talking to with my mom when I got out. She was like, like, why? Like, I just want to know why you think we would be okay. And that's not something like, I don't know. I never really thought about it. I was just like, yeah, they'll be fine. They'll move on. Like, my parents have other kids. And my mom was like, I can have a million more kids, which, I mean, theoretically isn't possible. But, she's like, I can have another kid. It'll never be you. Like, and that's the thing, is each person is their own person. I have so many people in my life that I know struggle with mental illness. And without them in my life, I would not be okay. I would not be the same. Like Tori said, you're not alone. And we've mentioned it before in other podcasts, like our sexual assault podcast, our LGBTQ podcast. If you're struggling and you feel like you can have, you have no one to talk to, DM Tori, DM I, DM our Twitter page, like Instagram. I promise you, if you message me and you say, hey, I am struggling really, really bad and I just need someone to talk to, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to like be like, oh my God, how weird, this person is messaging me. You can do whatever. Like, if you have my phone number, freaking call me. I mean, I can't tell you. I know that I remember one time calling the suicide hotline on a camping trip when I was surrounded by family. But at the time, I was just, in my thing, and I couldn't see past that moment, and calling the suicide hotline because I was like, I just don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do. Like, there are so many different different pages you can reach out to, different things you can reach out to.
So I actually volunteered for a crisis text line, which is, if you're not comfortable calling someone on the phone, you can text them. And the people on the other line, they actually go through like really extensive training. It was like a whole 6-week ordeal, and it's really eye-opening. So there's the suicide hotline is 1-800-273-8255, and it's 24/7. Or if you're more comfortable texting, 741-741 is who you'll text to speak with a crisis text line. And honestly, like Brooke said, we are here for you 24/7. I have stopped what I'm doing in the middle of the night to talk to someone, because I know how important it is to have someone. Don't go through this alone. As much as you think you may be alone, don't go through it alone. And it's so hard because, you really do think that you'll be doing everybody a favor by ending your life. But I promise you, you are not. You are not. And I thought the same thing, is like, people really thought like, and that's what I said in my note, I really thought like, everyone said it's so selfish, but it's selfish to make someone live the life you don't want to live. But like, that's not true. And I see that now, because I really thought I was doing everybody a favor. But then knowing and seeing people who've been affected by losing someone to suicide, like, it changes your whole life. And I promise you, whatever you did and whatever you feel like you're doing, or however draining you are to them, or however you think that you're making them feel, you're not. And even if you are, they would feel so much worse without you here.
And with that being said, we just want to let you all know we love you. We are here for you. We support you. Like I said, DM our personal page, DM our Twitter, our Spill the Tea page. One of us will reach back out to you, I promise.
We don't care if we don't know you've never met you. Reach out to us.
You are loved. You are valued. You're supported. You're not alone. And like I said, like you're not going through this alone. There are so many different people. There are so many things you can do. I'll try and list on our Twitter page too a couple different links you can reach out to, the whole 9 yards, because we want you guys to be safe. We want you to feel safe. And if you ever have a moment of like, I'm going to do it, I don't care what time it is, reach out. We want to be there for you.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week.